significantly changed. Autoimmune diseases and allergies are becoming accepted as almost the norm because of the increasing number of people who suffer from these conditions. So what must we do? Stand idly by and accept as inevitable that we are increasingly vulnerable? Fortunately, because of new discoveries that you need to know about, the answer is no. We don't have to accept such an outcome. We can empower our immune systems in order to give us and our family and friends and everyone we can share this information with the optimal opportunity to live the long and healthy life that we desire and deserve. Because of transfer factors. Transfer factors are nature's gift to us. They've been available to us for as long as life has existed on this earth, but only recently have we discovered their empowering role for our immune systems. In 1949, a researcher in South Carolina named H. Sherwood Lawrence was trying to understand how a person can become immune to a disease, how one's body can recognize and respond to a threat without becoming ill from that threat. So Dr. Lawrence found a lab assistant who had been exposed to tuberculosis. He knew this because that individual, when given something called a tuberculin skin test, reacted positively by whelping up in the area of the TB skin test injection. And then Dr. Lawrence tested other assistants until he found one who had a negative TB skin test, which meant that individual had never been exposed to tuberculosis. So Dr. Lawrence drew some blood from the TB skin test positive individual and processed it by spinning it in a centrifuge to separate the white blood cells, the germ-fighting cells called lymphocytes, from the red blood cells. And he took the white blood cells and by further processing broke their cell walls and removed the fluid and collected the fluid from within those fractured lymphocytes. And he put the fluid into a syringe and he injected it into the assistant who had never been exposed to tuberculosis and waited. It was really a pretty nervy thing to do. 2 days later, he did a TB skin test on the assistant who had never been exposed to tuberculosis. And lo and behold, the skin test whelped up, and he or she reacted just as if they had been exposed to tuberculosis. Dr. Lawrence had transferred the recognition of the tuberculosis germ from one who had been exposed to tuberculosis to one who had never been exposed. He didn't understand exactly what had happened. He just knew he had transferred something, some factor from one individual to another, and by doing so, he had transferred the ability to recognize a germ, tuberculosis, in an individual who hadn't had prior exposure. And thus the term transfer factor was introduced into the scientific world. Over the next several decades, millions of dollars were spent on transfer factor research, and over 3,000 papers were written. But the process of producing transfer factors was very expensive and time-consuming. Use of transfer factors was mainly confined to the lab, and the public was unaware of the potential health benefits that transfer factors offered. In 1989, 2 researchers in South Carolina made a very important discovery. Doctors Wilson and Paddock found that transfer factors were abundant in the first maternal milk, called colostrum, that's produced right at and right after birth. Further research revealed that all mammals produce transfer factors that are molecularly identical. It was discovered that Mother Nature has devised a method for the mother to pass on her immune system knowledge to her newborn by nursing. This first benevolent act by the mother enables the newborn, thrust from a warm, sterile environment of the womb to a harsh, cold world filled with germs, to survive. Let's examine exactly how this happens. Chickenpox is a good example to use because before the chickenpox vaccine, most people contracted this viral illness. But extremely rarely did anyone have a second bout with chickenpox. Why? Why not develop the illness over and over? Because the individual may have been exposed to chickenpox dozens, hundreds of times after that first episode. On the screen, you'll see a diagram which demonstrates how one builds up immunity to a disease. The straight line highlighted is a time sequence from the exposure to a disease until the immune system begins to respond. In this instance, it would be while the person with chickenpox was breaking out in little red bumps, which transformed to multiple itchy blisters. After several days, The immune system cells, which you see highlighted, begin to multiply. And once sufficient immune system cells have been created, you begin to win the battle, and the chickenpox virus is defeated. The blisters scab over, and eventually you get well. Your immune system ultimately protected you, but not before you went through some pretty miserable days of illness. So what then occurred? Your immune system stored the memory of the chickenpox virus in special immune system cells, which we refer to as, quite appropriately, memory cells. Later, you can walk into a room full of people with chickenpox and remain totally unconcerned, because now your body's immune system has knowledge about the identifying features of the chickenpox virus. And so, even though the chickenpox virus frequently tried to attack you again, it was unsuccessful, because each time it entered your body, the particular immune system memory cell that carried the identity of the virus instantly alerted its fellow immune system cells, and a huge number of fighters was produced, which overwhelmed the hapless chickenpox virus. And you didn't even know that you'd been exposed. You never became ill. You can see the short line in what is called a secondary immune response, as compared to the time sequence when you became ill, that primary immune response. This makes sense, doesn't it? What would be our quality of life if we became ill over and over with the same disease? We'd be ill all of the time. But by having an immune system that can remember prior illnesses, we can develop what is called resistance, or immunity to that disease. And what we've discovered is that the little protective memory molecule that provides us protection is that factor that Dr. Lawrence transferred from the person who had been exposed to tuberculosis to the person who hadn't been exposed. Memory molecules, which give us early recognition and a quick response to a disease threat, are called transfer factors. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a factory containing machines where we could produce transfer factors, so that we could consume them and have them in our bodies without having to go through the misery of having a disease like chickenpox? Well, the good news is that such factories exist. They are called dairy farms or hen houses. And the machines? Milk-producing cows and egg-laying chickens.
4Life's flagship product, Transfer Factor, is the result of modern science and a centuries-old observation. People noticed that milkmaids did not contract deadly smallpox like most of the population did. It turns out that exposure to cows, which often carried the milder cowpox virus, rendered these milkmaids immune to the far more fatal smallpox virus. Protection from disease, science later learned, could be transferred from one species to another. This is the basis for Transfer Factor, which supports, sustains, and fortifies the immune system.
If you look at the traditional approach to medicine in terms of a military model, what you have is disease attacks the patient, then the doctor attacks the disease. The problem with this is oftentimes in the process, the battlefield is also destroyed, and sometimes the cure can be worse than the disease itself. What the natural health field has done is try to provide products that are support to the immune army. Products like echinacea, vitamin C, garlic. You can think of those in terms of soldiers added to the immune army. But what you have with Transfer Factor is totally different. It's like giving the soldiers of your immune army classified information about the enemy. It's totally unique and unlike anything we've ever seen in its ability to support the immune system.
4Life Research has a long and proven track record of stable, continuous growth. Much of this success is due to solid corporate management. David Lisenby and his wife Bianca founded 4Life on a very basic principle: provide a valuable product that improves people's lives and maintain the very highest standards of corporate responsibility.
4Life Research is in a unique and rare position in an industry where most companies don't even get off the ground or only last a year or two. For Life has demonstrated solid, consistent growth year after year after year. In fact, we were just recognized as one of the fastest growing private companies in the United States by Inc. magazine. That's just one more reason